Hey YouTube, there's a guy on YouTube named Kevin Towle. He's got a channel called Kevin Towle Reads. I'll put a link to his channel in the description of this video. You should check it out. He's got a lot of cool book reviews and stuff like that. He sent me a bunch of books out of the blue, out of nowhere. And I'm going to talk to you today about one of them by Lord Dunsany, a really massive collection of Lord Dunsany. But before that, let me just show you. He sent me this collection here. It's all supernatural horror. I mean, it's got everything from Lovecraft to Fritz Leiber to Stephen King's in here, and then even Carl Edward Wagner, who's one of my favorite authors. Carl Edward Wagner's included in here. There's a lot of stuff in here I haven't read yet. So this is a really cool collection, and I'm very grateful to have it. I'm going to dive into this throughout the summer. He also sent me this Conan collection of Robert E. Howard's. I have this already, and I love it. This one is in better condition than mine because I got mine ages ago. So I think I'm going to keep the one that Kevin sent me, and then I'll probably take the one that I've got, the older one, and put it in one of those free libraries at the park, you know, like where they put Bibles and stuff like that. I'll put some Conan in there instead. And then he also sent me this other Conan collection, which I don't have. I may have read some of the stories that are included in here, but I'm not 100% sure. So this will also be on my end table to read throughout the summer. But Lord Dunsany, I don't know. Dunsany? Dunsany. Dunsany sounds better to me, but I'm 99.9% sure it's Dunsany. At any rate, this is called In the Land of Time and Other Fantasy Tales. This is a massive collection. I mean, it's a pretty thick book. And I know there are other Dunsany collections that are even thicker than this. The guy wrote so much stuff throughout his life. But we're going to talk about this one today. So I want to kind of tell you a little bit about this collection. I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. I tend to ramble. Penguin Classics put this out. Again, it's called In the Land of Time and Other Fantasy Tales. Lord Dunsany or Dunsany. I mispronounce everything, so please forgive me. If I mispronounce any of the stories in this collection or anything at all, that's just, I'm deficient in that manner. I'm probably lazy because I don't bother to try to pronounce things correctly. I'm going to call him Dunsany, whether you like it or not. There's 6 sections of this collection. Like I said, it's 390 some pages. And each section, these were not things that are written in any particular order. They're combined by theme more than anything. The first section, Pagana and Environs, this is his world building. And I think that's probably what Dunsany is known for the most. I would have to assume. I am not a scholar on Dunsany at all. I don't know very much about his life. I did do a little bit of research after getting this collection from Kevin. He is a legit lord. Like, this is not like, he's not like a member of Lords of Acid or anything like that. The dude was born in a castle. He's like upper class. But he's not someone that was hauled up in his castle. He wasn't a recluse in a castle. Maybe he was a silver spoon sort of guy, but he traveled the world. And if I'm not mistaken, he even served in World War I. So he knows a lot about the world. He knows a lot about human nature. And I think most importantly, he knows a lot about nature itself. There's an extreme reverence for nature throughout this. So this whole first section is basically building his world. These were all written at different times, but they were all combined into this section. So you have an understanding of the foundation of everything that comes after it. I struggled with this. I struggled with this whole book. I'm going to try to hold off from telling you why, but this section is nothing but world building. Nothing happens in these first 73 some pages. It's essentially him talking about all of these fictional gods and places and cities and their rise and their fall, but there's no protagonist here. The protagonist would probably be the narrator, which is someone that writes in a bit of a dreamlike state. These feel like someone that's dictating their dreams in this first section. So the protagonist really is Dunsany, I guess you could say. That's the first section. Second section builds on all of that, where there's some characters introduced, where there's very light action that takes place. And I'm not saying action, like I don't want fight scenes. It doesn't have to be battles and dragons or any of that. I just want someone to go from point A to point B. Nobody goes from point A to point B in the first section. There's a few people that go from point A to point B in the second section. They kind of do a little bit of things. But again, much more atmosphere, much more world building, much more stream of consciousness dreaming in the second section with the introduction of some folks. Section 3 is my favorite, prose poems. And unfortunately, this is the shortest section. The reason I like this section is it's going to probably come through in my discussing this book. All of this is all absurdity. It is absurd. None of this ever existed. None of this ever would exist. None of this really ever should exist, in my opinion. But it existed in Dunsany's mind. And I think he gives away a little bit. He admits that in this prose poems section, because a couple of these very, very short shorts have a slight bit of humor to them. There's just a little bit of irony and just blatant absurdity that I think, and for my tastes, for what I look for, it suits this material better. Fantasy and reality is more present day stuff. And actually, really, the rest of this is more present day stuff. So all of this is things that took place, never took place. But if they were to have taken place, it would have been prehistory, Christian history, pre-Sumeria, probably pre-Atlantis, this stuff. If it's even on Earth, we don't even know. More modern day stuff, more of a narrative happening here, people doing things. The problem that I have with the more present day material in this collection is the things that people were doing do not interest me. I don't relate to them. I don't relate to their motivation. And I don't really relate to the way that Dunsany talks about what they're doing. His perspective on what they're doing is still very much in a dreamlike manner. Jorkins, this whole section is all about one character named Jorkins, who I did not find interesting at all. I'm afraid to say that because I know that there are I think there's maybe I don't know, hundreds of these Jorkin tales that the guy has written throughout his life. And there's only, 5 of them in this collection? But this Jorkins guy was apparently very important to Dunsany, to Lord Dunsany. And I wouldn't hang out with him. If he was hitchhiking, I'd pick him up, but I'd be looking for the first opportunity to drop him off somewhere. Some other late tales. This section is just stuff that I think a few of these had not been published elsewhere. Of all of these, the one I like the best is Poseidon. Again, Poseidon really belongs, in my opinion, in this prose poems section, because this is certainly an absurd story and there's a bit of humor, a tinge of sadness in Poseidon as well, but also a bit of a criticism of religion in Poseidon as well. And if you're reading this stuff, you would assume that Lord Dunsany is probably a deeply religious person, because there's a very thick religious connotation to all of the mythos that he's created. He describes these places often in a dream state, like he is stream of consciousness, like he just woke up or he's in a trance and he's dictating this stuff to someone. But he describes him in such a way that it conveys an element of faith. It feels like he has faith in the legitimacy of these places. And I think that makes it all very compelling to other people. I'm a hard sell on this kind of stuff. I'm going to talk more. I'm trying to postpone my opinion on all this. But at any rate, I have a feeling that this guy was probably not so much religious in real life. But I don't know. I think it may be that he had a longing. In fact, this one here, the Kith of the Elk Folk, features a species of life called the Wild Things. And I think the protagonist of this story, so these Kith of Elk Folk, they're like gnomes, sort of like gnomes, or they're like leprechaun type people. And one of them, they've been around forever, and humans come to the area essentially, and they have a church, and one of them witnesses people in the church worshiping and singing a song to Jesus or to the Judeo-Christian God, and the elk folk wants to be human to experience that level of joy. And I think this whole story, this is one of my favorites in the story, because I could relate to the character. I have a sense that there's something happening. And when I say happening, I mean there's a purpose to the story. He's writing this not just to have a stream of consciousness experience. He's writing this to communicate something to his audience. And it sounds like I'm shortchanging everything else. And I'm not, because he is communicating stuff to his audience for these other stories. I'm just not his audience for these other stories. At any rate, I think that Dunsany, Lord Dunsany, I think that he relates to this elk folk wild thing character and its desire to be human, to experience the joys of worshiping a god, which I don't think Lord Dunsany was capable of doing in real life. My assumption. Could be totally wrong. I'm psychoanalyzing someone that I know very little about. I'm judging him just based on what I read throughout this story. And anyways, that is the 6 sections. And I did mention just a moment ago, I'm judging him based on what I read throughout this. I guess it's probably time to talk about my opinion of this because, well, I didn't read all of this. I started every story that's in here, but very few of these did I read to the end because I absolutely struggled with this material for a variety of reasons. Let me tell you one of the reasons. How about this? Let me show you an example of one of the stories because I got a couple little dog ears in here that I want to talk about. So let me show you one of these stories and I'll read to you from it and maybe that'll make sense to you why I struggled with this. All right, put this little tab in here because I want to talk about this first paragraph. Here's the thing with this guy's writing. Just look at this page. This is all a paragraph. It began on the previous page, way up here. So that's the start of the paragraph. That's still the same paragraph, and that's still the same paragraph. I don't care who you are, what you're describing. If you can't organize, I'm being critical now. Please, if you love this man's work, this is not he's good. He's good for a reason. He's just not good for me. If you can't organize your thoughts in almost really 2 pages into such a way that you're able to, like there's chunks of dialogue. He'll have dialogue between 2 different characters going back and forth in a conversation, all in the same paragraph with a bit of narration thrown in and description thrown in. It's rough. It's rough. And to compare this to someone else, I made a video recently about Thomas Ligotti. Thomas Ligotti does the same thing. The first time I read Thomas Ligotti, I thought he was punishing me. I thought he was doing this because he hated his readers so much that he wanted them to suffer. Legitimately, I thought that about Ligotti. And that might be partially true, but I don't think that's entirely true. Ligotti's worldview is that the world is entirely, comprised of chaos, that we live in a chaotic existence and we are helpless at the whims of existence, right? That nature is out to destroy and we are just subject to nature's whims. And his writing style indicates that very well because although he does do a paragraph that may last pages, Ligotti, it builds to something. It builds to a crescendo. As you're reading the paragraph, and because I do struggle, as I'm struggling to stay focused on the paragraph, I can see where it's going. And when I get to the end of it, I can look back and say, okay, I get that. That was all a big, long spearhead leading to something else. It was a pyramid wide at the bottom, but it funneled into something else. This dude, Lord Dunsany, he's not building a pyramid. He's building a cloud. He's building mist that's rising up, fog. He's a foggy sort of guy. And everything here is nebulous. It doesn't move in any particular direction. It is very, very dreamlike. And if you're someone that can appreciate that, first of all, I admire you. I'm trying to hold off on my thoughts, but dude, I'm not even here to tell you, but I struggle with that, okay? So anyways, where's my little dog here? Here it is. Okay, this first paragraph is a short paragraph, but this is all essentially like one sentence, maybe one or 2 sentences, okay? Let me read this to you, and then you'll understand why I struggle also. Not just with the way that this guy thinks through his story, but also with the story he's telling, okay? In the morning of his 250th year, Sheparok, the centaur, went to the golden coffer, wherein the treasure of the centaurs was, and taking from it the hoarded amulet that his father, Jishak, in the years of his prime, had hammered from the mountain gold and set with opals, bartered from the gnomes, he put upon his wrist and said no word, but walked from his mother's cavern. That's all one sentence. That's crazy. And He took with him, too, that clarion of the centaurs, that famous silver horn that in his time had summoned to surrender 17 cities of man, and for 20 years had braved at star-girt walls in the siege of Tholdenblarna, the citadel of the gods. What time the centaurs waged their fabulous war and were not broken by any force of arms, but retreated slowly in a cloud of dust before the final miracle of the gods, that they brought in their desperate need for their ultimate armory. That's the second sentence. He took it and strode away, and his mother only sighed and let him go. Now, centaurs are silly things, first of all. Of all the things, they're silly. He's not being silly here, though. He's being reverent towards the centaur. What I get from all of this is that this dude, Sheparalk, is 250 years old, and he still lives with his mom. So like when I'm reading this, I see that, my mind is stuck on that, and I have a deficiency where I can't pay attention to anything else, because that is such an absurd thing. In my mind, this story should be nothing about Sheparalk, the 250-year-old centaur, and his mom, because his mom only sighed and let him go at the end. Like, that is an interesting part of the story. That is the story. Like, that is something that, although centaurs are absurd, the relationship between this, video game playing, sitting on an orange crate in his mom's basement, shit talking on the internet, this keyboard warrior, Sheparalk, that's something I understand. I could relate to that. I'm kind of like that, except I don't live with my mom. But I am a shit talker on the internet. At any rate, that is the story. And that's nothing. That's it. He disposes of that. We never hear about any of that. And this little centaur guy just goes on around, and it's like he just abandons the most potentially interesting part of the whole thing for stuff that I just can't relate to at all, and that I struggle to focus on as I'm reading. So a couple that I liked, again, in that prose and poems section, again, these are also short, but it's my favorite section because of the absurdity of it, the more transparent absurdity. Charon, I don't speak Greek. I apologize. I wish I did. I'm pronouncing that wrong, but you know who he is. He's the ferryman that takes people that have passed away to the land of the dead on his boat across the river Styx or something like that. Clash of the Titans, you know what I'm saying? At any rate, this story is really nice. I like it because it adds a bit of humanity to Charon. This story is essentially about the last human, the final human for the ferryman to ferry to the underworld, to the land of the dead. And he's both relieved that his work is done, because this guy's got to be a zillion years old, but then at the same time he's sad because now he's out of work. And I found this a very compelling story. I like this one quite a bit. I got a little tab on this one, The Workman. I saw a workman fall with his scaffolding right from the summit of some vast hotel. And he came down, I saw him holding a knife and trying to cut his name in the scaffolding. He had time to try and do this, for he must have been nearly 300 feet to fall. So right off the bat, that is cool. So this dude's falling off a scaffolding, doing some work, and as he's falling down, he's got a knife and he's trying to carve his name as he goes down. That is wonderfully absurd. That's beautifully absurd. That would be a scene in a Quentin Dupieux film. I love that. That's really cool. Let's keep going. And I could think of nothing but his folly in doing this futile thing, for not only would the man have not be unrecognizably dead in 3 seconds, but the very pole on which he tried to scratch whatever his name he had time for was certain to be burned in a few weeks for firewood. That's also cool. So the narrator, the guy that's watching this happen, is like, he's carving his name in this thing, but it's only a piece of scaffolding that's not part of the final structure. It's a temporary piece of wood that's up there. So this guy's trying to make a name for himself. He's trying to leave an imprint of his existence on the planet, and he's dying, and it's futile what he's trying to do, because he's trying to do this on something that is not permanent. That's bittersweet. What is the word for that? That's melancholy, tragic, I guess. It's a unique thing that's happening there. Then I went home, for I had work to do. The guy's like, oh, I got work to do. I'm going home. I'm not going to do anything else. And all that evening I thought of the man's folly, till the thought hindered me from serious work. And late that night, while I was still at work, The ghost of the workman floated through my wall and stood before me laughing. I heard no sound until after I spoke to it. But first of all, I also find it interesting. The ghost is an it, okay? It's not a him. So calling the ghost an it, it's a thing. It's not a soul. It's not a person. It's not the consciousness of the workman. It's an it. That's a fascinating little, and he did that on purpose. Everything in here is on purpose, by the way. But I could see the gray, diaphanous form standing before me, shuddering with laughter. I spoke at last and asked what it was laughing at, and then the ghost spoke. It said, "I'm a-laughing at you sitting and working there." "And why?" I said. "Do you laugh at serious work?" "Why, your bloomin' life all go by like the wind," he said, "and your old silly civilization all be tied up in a few centuries." So this ghost is like, this guy who tried to carve his name to make a name for himself in civilization. He wanted to be remembered in civilization. Now that he's beyond that, he's on the other side. He's like, it's all a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of silliness. And he came to the narrator because he knows that the narrator saw him. And the thought of all that was stuck in this narrator's head while he was trying to do work into the evening. It's pretty cool. Then he fell to laughing again, and this time audibly, and laughing still faded back through the wall again and into the eternity from which he had come. I think that's a great story. If this whole book was a bunch of stuff like this, I would like it a lot more. All right, I got to read you the beginning of The Relenting of Sarnadak. Now, Lord Dunsany, again, late 1800s, early 100 years ago. The words that this guy used 100 years ago, they meant something different back then than they do now, obviously. So I'm just going to read you the first couple paragraphs of this. This is not supposed to be funny, but it made me laugh out loud. The Relenting of Sarnadak. The lame boy Sarnadak tended sheep on a hill to the southward of the city. Sarnadak was a dwarf and greatly derided in the city. For the women said, "It is very funny that Sarnadak is a dwarf." And they would point their fingers at him, saying, "This is Sarnadak. He is a dwarf. Also, he is very lame." Lame, he's a crippled dwarf, and they're pointing it out. So this guy's not very handy with the ladies. He's a little crippled dwarf. I just found that funny as all could be. There's a lot in this thing. Let me wrap this up and give you some of my final thoughts on it as a whole. Here's my notes on this collection. Anytime I read something that's challenging for me, I tend to jot some ideas down because, like I said earlier, I really struggled with this collection. This was a lot harder to read than I had thought. I was vaguely familiar with Lord Dunsany before Kevin sent me this collection. I think he may have even mentioned this collection in a video, and that's what kind of got my brain thinking about it. And I looked him up a little bit just to see what his stuff was about. And it sounded kind of right up my alley, to be honest with you. But I had so much difficulty with these stories. So the first thing I want to say is, who is this collection for? It's not for me. I wish it was. I'm deeply regretful, and I would say that it's been bothering me reading this collection that I just couldn't get it. It didn't work for me. It wasn't for me, and I wanted it so badly to be for me because this guy's inspired so many great authors, and he's such a talented author, and he's got such a unique style. And I think, I'm not a historian, I'm not the greatest reader out there, but I don't think anyone quite did what he did until he did it. He kind of laid the groundwork for Lovecraft and Tolkien, I would imagine, as well, and Clark Ashton Smith and Jack Vance. Like, Jack Vance is someone I have read that has the same feel as Dunsany, but he does it in a way that works for me. I enjoy reading Jack Vance. So what am I trying to say? Who is this for? This collection is for people that like the act of reading. They like the process of reading almost as much as they like what they're reading. Just like I like to go on hikes. I like to walk. I can walk pretty much anywhere. As long as there's not a bunch of traffic where I'm constantly, worried about my life. I could go on any trail and I could walk for miles and miles and miles and hours and hours and hours and be happy as a clam. Not everybody could do that. I'm not that way with reading. That's one of the reasons this wasn't for me, is that I don't necessarily enjoy the process of reading. I don't like to sit in a chair and look at paper. I'm an author, which I know that's peculiar. I can write fairly well, but I certainly don't read fairly well. I write better than I read. So, and that's not saying much. I'm not trying to boast by saying that. That's just the facts. If I'm a mediocre writer, I'm like a preschooler at reading. So if you like to read, if you value language, this guy is one of the best that there could possibly be. And I think that's part of the reason he has so much appeal, is that his use of language is unique from my experience. There's a rhythm to his writing, where even the stuff that's obviously not in that prose and poems section, the stuff that is just a regular story that might be 10, 20 pages or whatever, it reads poetically because he has a certain rhythm. And the rhythm that he has, I said stream of consciousness earlier in this video. He's a free jazz musician. If this guy did music, he wouldn't be composing power metal. He wouldn't be composing anything electronic that I like that's got a very metronome type of tempo to it, where there's a constant reminder that you're on track with what is going. And it builds to a crescendo, and that crescendo gives you some sort of epiphany. There's no crescendos in this guy's writing. There's no epiphany. Most of these stories are anticlimactic. You kind of get a sense, you get a feeling that something's going to happen, and like a half version of what you expect. Your expectations are met halfway when it does happen, and everybody returns back to where they started from in the beginning. That's a pet peeve I have. And I have that pet peeve with a lot of fantasy, where the story is somebody starting out to do something, they muddle around in life, and they end up back where they started again. That sentiment is pretty pungent in this guy's writing. And I say pungent because I don't like that. In my opinion, if you're going to devote your time to write something as much as this guy wrote, like, write something that could potentially change the reader that read it. And I don't know, maybe Lord Dunsany has inspired, he has inspired. Like I said, he inspired a lot of authors. So maybe I just don't get it. It's not for me. I'm all into meaning over method, first of all, with all art. Whatever it is, meaning is more important to me than method. I care more about the purpose of the art, what the artist is trying to convey, what the artist is trying to express, what that artist's worldview is, even if I disagree with it. Again, I'm coming back to Ligotti. I compare this guy to Ligotti a lot because I disagree with Ligotti wholeheartedly. He couldn't be more wrong about life, but I admire him so much, and his writing style suits his worldview so perfectly. I don't have that same sense with Dunsany. I envision Lord Dunsany to be, he wasn't, but I can envision him writing all this stuff from an opium den in China when Britain controlled China. Like, this guy, he was on something. And I like a lot of people that are on stuff. I would say more than half of the things I like came from people that are on stuff. But the way that stuff impacted this guy is in a way that it falls flat on me, unfortunately. And I said earlier that I regret it. I deeply regret it because there is value in what he's doing. So, all right, have you ever seen Hot Fuzz, the film Hot Fuzz? Simon Pegg's character in Hot Fuzz, he's just not able to switch off. That's the term he uses throughout the movie. He's always engaged. He's always focused, and he's an overachiever. And he's great at his job. He's great at life. But he can't switch off. And not his inability to switch off not only becomes a problem for him psychologically, but it becomes a liability for him, like health-wise. And his life expectancy could be shortened by not being able to switch off, right? I'm kind of like that. And I gravitate towards art or literature that echoes that. I can't switch off. Lord Dunsany I think in his real life, he was probably switched on all the time. Maybe that's why he switched off to write. But he was switched off the entire time he was writing, in my opinion. He was stream of consciousness, dictating his dreams in this cloud-like nebulous fashion. And as I'm reading these stories, as I can't I can't focus on what the guy is trying to communicate. So I'm reading this stuff, and in my brain the whole time, I'm thinking about how am I supposed to explain this to somebody else? Because when Kevin sent me this book, I intend to make a video on it right away. I think it's such a beautiful thing he did to share these books with me, especially this one, because I think he knows I was interested or curious about it. So I intended to make a video from the start. And as I'm reading these stories that, in my opinion, aren't really going anywhere, and the people in these stories are like driftwood, they're just floating along, I'm thinking to myself, how am I supposed to make a video about this? And that anxiety got in the way of even enjoying the stories because I can't switch off. So if you are someone, who is this collection for? This collection is for someone that enjoys reading for the sake of reading, who enjoys language, and who has a natural ability to just go with the flow. I can't go with the flow. Free jazz. This whole collection is free jazz, in my opinion. Even the music I like a lot of ambient music. I listen to a whole lot of ambient music, but even the ambient music I like, it still has some sort of structure to it. I could follow the bleeps and the blops of that music and the little bit of reverberations and the quiet parts that become louder. I can follow all that because it has it's built on something. Whereas free jazz is not built on anything concrete. This guy's stories is very much like that. And I deeply regret that I can't embrace that, because I do think not only would my life be improved if I could embrace that, I think the things that I create would be better if I was able to harness that. If I could be inspired by Dunsany in the same way that, let's say, Jack Vance was inspired by Dunsany, I think my writing would be better. When I used to be a musician, I'm retired now, but when I was a musician, if I was able to get into something like free jazz or something that's just completely avant-garde, musique concrete kind of stuff, and if I was able to embody that in my music, I think my music would have been better too. I think that's an important part of being a whole, of being a complete artist. I think you have to be able to do that as well. And I've never been able to do that. So reading this collection, it's reminded me of that. So even, I guess, all right, final thoughts. This is terrible. Every one of these goes so long. And Kevin, if you're watching this, you probably got, family stuff you're supposed to be dealing with. Your job is busy this time of year. You got your own, and you probably, I'm sorry for making you watch this far, Kevin, because you're probably watching it. Even if this collection was not for me, and even if I honestly just didn't enjoy most of the stories, I still got value out of this, because it kind of forced me to introspect a little bit and understand more about myself and understand the reasons why I can't absorb this type of literature, this type of art so well. And it's caused me to think a little bit more about the stuff that I'm writing and the more creative things I do as I get older and older. It helps you kind of put all that into perspective. So tinged with a bit of sorrow and regret for not being a Dunsanyite. That can't possibly be a thing. God help us if there are Dunsanites out there. There probably is some sort of Dunsanite thing. I know there's a whole record label devoted to this guy's writing. And I think they're called Pagana, like that, named after his mythos. There's probably Dunsanites out there. I'm just a dunce. That's what it comes down to. I'm a dunce. I need a dunce cap. Do they still have dunce caps? I don't know. You people that watch this with children that go to school, do your kids at school go in the corner with a big KKK hat on? Were those dunce caps supposed to be KKK hoods? They're almost the same thing, more or less. Just doesn't have the thing that covers your face. I'm a dunce. I'll never be a Dunsanite. And I'm not denigrating Dunsanites if they exist. I think that, like I said, there's value in what this guy does. His work is for a particular type of person that part of me wishes that I could at least be part-time. Anyways. Okay, I think you've all had enough of me for now. Lord Dunsany, In the Land of Time and Other Fantasy Tales. Appreciate you watching this video. Appreciate you, Kevin, for sending me this book. And I'll catch you guys in another video in the future.